Hello everyone, welcome back to the 2.7 tier list series. This is part 3, low, mid, and high alpha, the mid tiers. This video is probably going to be really long because it's really crowded, but I'll do my best. And we'll start with low alpha with the commons. So, first is Allosaurus. Allo is one of the strongest commons. It's basically Tarbo, but better, with more health, more damage, and its impact is a shield breaking one. But it is a very basic chomper, and it does chomper things. Yeah. Next is Dinochirus. Dinochirus is a cunning creature. It's got really low health, okay damage, and really high speed, like most cunning creatures. The good thing about this one is it has Revenge Rampage. So if you bring it into Revenge, you got 2 Rampages back to back. So that's 5,400 damage, which is pretty good. But it is a cunning creature, and resilience are meta, so yeah, it does get hurt by that. Alright, next is Drycorex Gen 2, which is, in my opinion, the best of the common swappers. The infamous Drycorex Gen 2. So, low health, high damage, low speed. Swapping Savagery. So this is the only creature swapping Savagery that's not a legendary or unique. And then Armor Piercing Strike, Fierce Impact. So you could bring it in, swap its Savagery, take off 40% of the opponent's health, and then smack him with a 2250 impact. That's a lot of damage. So yeah, Draco Gen 2 is pretty decent. Next is Notebotasaurus. Nunda is a really good common in my opinion. It's just 128 speed with D-Cell immunity is really good. This is one of the fastest D-Cell immune dinos in the entire game. As well as having really good base damage with Ferocious Strike. So you can literally do 4,500 in 2 turns with this thing. And plus, its health isn't the worst. It's not very good, but it's better than it could be. Overall, Nunda's a really good common. Next is Skulosaurus. So Skulosaurus is basically Eupocephalus, but for the most part, it's better. Less speed, more health, less armor, so I think it's got very similar effective HP. But more damage, and it can't be slowed down. Unfortunately, its Rampage has delay, so it has to. But that's actually not too bad because you could just set it up as Spirit of Vulnerability, do 4,000 in 2 turns, which is good considering how much survivability this thing has. Overall, pretty good. Our last low alpha common is Tani Calagrius. Tani is really good. Really good common. So, it has... Sure, its health sucks, but it has a lot of damage and a lot of speed. It can't be distracted. And it has really, actually, a good moveset. Definite Strike is one of the best basics in the game, and then Nullifying Impact. This thing is really good at anti-dodge. And it does, I think that's 3,900 in 2 turns, I think. In fact, let me pull up a calculator. Not that great at math. Yeah, 3,900. So it's got a pretty decent damage tier for 2 turns. Overall, it's a good, cunning-ish creature. And yeah. Alright, on to the rares. Our first is Aramborginia. Arambor is kind of like Quetzal, but more offense based. So it's a little bit slower and it has a lot less health, but it has Rampage and Run. And in my opinion, a better swapping ability. I wouldn't say it's much better than Quetzal. This is on the lower end of low alpha, but it is better. Arctops. Another cunning. These mid tiers are full of cunning creatures. So, cunning stats. Can't be distracted like most cunning creatures. And then distraction, revenge, distracting strike, and rampage. So, you actually will probably be doing rampage more than revenge, distracting strike on turn 1, even when you're doing revenge. But that's just because rampage is a lot of turn 1 damage. 2800 is pretty good. Assisting's got 4200 to 2 turns. Not bad. Arctops is a decent cunning creature. Next is Arctops' rival in rare tournaments, which is Gorgonops. A lot of people think Gorgonops is better, but I actually think Arctops is slightly better. So, Gorgonops is got more health, more speed, but a lot less base damage. Still has distraction, and it's got cunning impact and revenge rampage. Revenge rampage is good, but I think Gorgonops is let down a little bit by the really bad base damage. On revenge, it's still more 2-turn damage than Arctops, but it's just something about Arctops I think makes it better than Gorgonops. But they are very close in viability. Gorgosaurus is next. Gorgosaurus is another chomper. I would put this at almost equal strength with Allo. So it's got it's on the lower end of Rex animation for health. It's got good damage. Its speed is absolute trash, though. Although it's like that for most of these things. So it can't be slowed, but that will not help at all in unboosted because of how slow it is. And then Fierce Strike, Defense Shouting Impact, and Ferocious Strike. So it does have some good damage output with the Ferocious Strike, Defense Shouting Impact. Of course, all these chompers have good damage output. Overall, Gorgo's okay, but it shines in a boosted environment more than in an unboosted environment. If this is boosted, then it would be like way up here. So yeah. Next is Megalosaurus. Megalo is basically Majongasaurus, but much better. Like, much better. So it doesn't have the swap in, which swap of Ferocity is not really that good anyways, but instead has Ferocious Strike, and then it's got Resilient Strike and Taunting Shield and Armor Piercing Counter like Majonga. But it also has better HP, and then I guess Distraction Resistance doesn't hurt. Overall, it's a decent counterattacker. It's got really good matchups, but it's easy to set up on just because it's so slow. Overall, decent rare. Myelania. Poor Myelania. It's just gotten the Nerf hammer several times since it was added. It used to be so good. Like, it had regeneration, 3600 health. It could heal half of that. And it still had Superior Vulnerability and Devastation. It was bleed immune. Now it's not quite so good. I think a few updates ago, they just changed regular emergency heal to lesser emergency heal. Well, I don't know why. They didn't need to be nerfed anymore. Myelania is still a decent resilient creature, though, with a lot of survivability. And 1000 base damage actually is pretty okay for a Devastation Dino. But it is nothing compared to its old self. Parasaurus. Parasaurus is probably at the very bottom of low alpha. Parasaurus is not as good as it used to be. It used to have, like, I think it was 1200 base damage, but I'm not entirely sure. But it had Vulnerability Strike and Ferocious Impact. It still has that. It still does a lot of damage of that combo. It's just it's not as much as it used to be when it had higher base damage. This thing is just going to die against any cunning creature that looks at it. But against like armor and shield based resilience, and then against slower fierce creatures, it's pretty good. And it's got no escape too. Okay, that was our last rare for low alpha. Let's start with the epics. So you have Aquilamimus, which is at the very bottom of this tier. Aquila is pretty bad for an epic hybrid. Well, definitely not as bad as like Spinosaurus, for example. It's still not good at all. The health is same as Spinosaurus. The damage is less. Speed is more. The damage output in this thing is just not good. Evasive Strike's fine. Fine. Stacking the Impact's fine. Evasive Rampage is actually pretty good. Group Distraction is really bad though. It's just the damage output isn't good. It's still a little over 4,000 in 2 turns, which isn't that bad, but it could be more. Like, give this thing Gallimimus's base damage, give it 1,300 and then a little bit more HP, and this thing is really good. And then give it Gally's resistances too. And even Fearless Flap. That'd be good too. Yeah, Aquila needs some work. Next is Bumpy, which is another lower end low alpha. And it's a new one. This is the weakest of the 2.7 dinos by a decent margin. It's another Ankylosaur tank thing. So it's got it's actually not that much armor compared to others of its type, and mid-level HP for an Ankylosaur, good damage for an Ankylosaur, and I guess okay speed. Some useless resistances. Group Downing Shield's impact is, in my opinion, a pretty a really good move. And then Invincibility is fine, and Spear of Vulnerability is always good. Stunning Alert is pretty, kind of bad, but it's not a terrible swap in. It just could be better. I don't know why they made it worse when it's a threatened state. Alright. Our next epic is Megalogaia, which is another epic hybrid. Megalogaia is on the higher end of low alpha. It's definitely better than Aquilamimus. In fact, I might even move Aquilamimus down to beta. I don't know. Where are you? Right there. So Megalogaia is basically a speedy counter attacker with some shields and a lot of slowdown. Unfortunately, it's not D-cell immune like it used to be. Megalogaia used to be so strong before 2.0. Like 1,200, 1,100, something like that base damage with this counterattack, and it was slow immune, and it had a little bit more HP. That was really good. So the base stats really aren't that good. They're 75% slow resistance is alright, but it's not slow immune, slow immune would benefit this thing quite a bit, in my opinion, especially against the slower but D-cell immune tanks. So this thing has a lot of slowing and a lot of shields, and a counterattack. It's a counterattacker. There really isn't much else to say about it. Our next one is Majestotherium. Where are you? So Majestotherium is a rending... Well, it's basically Androsarchus, but a lot worse. I would put it on the higher end of low alpha, though. So, low health, I'd say speed, and decent damage with a really high crit chance. Slow immune. No escape's good. Swap and Frosty. Swap and Frosty is actually better in this than it is in the counterattackers, in my opinion, since it allows it to do basically a running takedown on turn 1. But armor piercing impact really isn't that good. Just give it defense shattering or fierce impact. But yeah, it's a worse Androsarchus. Okay, next is Notebotasaurus, which is another tank right there. So this is kind of in the middle to low side of low alpha. So it's got some resistances. It's got a lot of health and some armor. For a tank, not the worst damage, though it is kind of slow. Resilient Strike, Group Disarming Strike. Group Disarming Strike sucks. Tonic Rampage isn't terrible on this creature just because it's only Rampage, but it is still a bad move. And then Tonic Shield is fine. Notepato's not terrible, but there are better epic hybrid tanks. Okay, next is Post-Dimetrodon. Post-Dimetrodon is one of the best creatures of low alpha. It has, it's got good health, low damage, although it does have some good multipliers to make up for that, and high speed with some pretty good resistances. So it's got Fierce Strike. Group Frosty Strike is pretty bad, and but Fierce Impact's good, and it does do some decent damage. It's got 3750 in 2 turns, which is not bad. And then Heal is I guess good, especially compared to Ferocity. Overall, if just buff the amount of time that Group Frosty Strike lasts, and then this thing would beat Sarcorixis. I'm pretty sure. I think. I don't know. Or even give it more base damage. That'd be good too. It's just a weaker Gorga Sukis, but it's not awful. Alright, next is Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is one of the weakest low alphas. You would think a Brachiosaur animation creature would be really good, because basically all the other ones are. But not. Well, except for Notebotasaurus. But this one is pretty bad. High health, sure. But survivability just isn't enough for a Devastation Dino. Low damage, but it's a Devastation Dino. And low speed. It's D-cell immune, yes, but I don't. Its resistances are worse than the other non-hybrid Brachiosaurs because it doesn't have that stun immune or stun resistance, whatever it is. And then I really wish it got like Superior Vulnerability and then some kind of shielding move. Taunting Vulnerability is really bad. And then the counterattack really does not help this thing's case either, because that's just going to make the vulnerability go away so that it won't be there for devastation. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but I don't think it's good at all. Stegosaurus. Why are the images not loading? Whatever. So this is a cunning, fierce Pachycephalosaur, although I would kind of consider it pure cunning or maybe wild card. Yeah, it's kind of weird. So its base stats are pretty bad, and its resistances aren't great either. But the moveset's fine. Critical Impact's not bad on this thing. Instant Charge is always good. Cunning Strike's not terrible. Swap and Sun isn't that good. So, yeah. It's Stegosaurus. It's really not that good. Stegoceratops. This thing is really overrated, in my opinion. So, it's just a worse Ionosuchus, which we'll get to later in the video. So, Stegoceratops, it's another swapper. I don't really like this swapper, just because its damage output is not good, and its health isn't that great. It's got better base stats than the previous Ceratopsians, but the moveset's not that great. Slowing Impact's a good move, but it's just not enough. If this thing had, like, greater Stunning Impact, then this would be at least mid-alpha, probably higher. But yeah, it could use some work. Alright, the last epic for low alpha is Trodon. Trodon's another one that I think is pretty overrated. It's got decent damage output despite the low base damage with this double rampage, so that's 4,800 to 2 turns. It's just not as much as it could be. And plus these rampages really aren't that good rampages. It's just the worst Dakota Raptor. Dakota Raptor's a thing, which means that this dinosaur doesn't really have much use. Alright, moving on to the legendaries of low alpha. Our first one is the Sungaia, which I would put as one of the best in this tier. So, it's one of the best creatures in this tier, but also one of the worst legendaries in the game. So, low health, it's just got really bad base stats, but a okay moveset. Group Distorting Strike is trash, and Group Frosty really isn't that good. But at least it's not Group Frosty Strike, because that would just waste all the counterattacks. Who is calling me? Ignore that. So, Great Emergency Heal is really good with that Frosty, because it will heal basically all of its health. And then the sword encounter is nice too. So yeah. I mean, it's not, like, terrible, but it is a really bad legendary. Okay. Parasaurolophus, the only legendary non-hybrid, and also really bad. This is on the very low end of low alpha. Its main issue is just the base stats are trash and the moveset's not that good. So, it's a Hadrosaur, but so it should have more health than this. This thing just has... It's got the same base stats as basic Parasaurolophus, just less health. Why? And sure, Resilient Rampage is a really good move. But is it really going to survive to get it that often? No. This thing just needs a base stat buff. So just give it like 45 to 4,800 health, and then give it some more speed. And then maybe change this to like Greater Emergency Heal or something. Yeah, I don't know. It's not that good. Well, of course it isn't. It's really bad. Okay, Tragodistus. Tragodistus is Amargocephalus' legendary super hybrid, and it is terrible as well. So it has really good survivability. That's where the good things end. Group Disability Strike is obviously trash, though the other moves are fine. It just doesn't have damage output, and it's really slow, and the resistances are not good. There really isn't that much to say about Tragodistus. It's just bad. Alright, mid-alpha. So there are 3 commons here. We will start with Aramotherium. These are the after this tier, there are no more commons. I just went past Aramotherium. There it is. So, Aramotherium, it's got some of the worst base stats in the game, but in my opinion, it is the strongest common in the game because of its moveset. Camouflage is awesome, especially with a counterattack. And then you could do Cunning Rampage for that extra damage. This thing it's so good against fierce creatures and just things that can't deal with dodge. And it's D-Cell immune too, so if it's something with like a D-Cell move that doesn't remove its speed increase from Camouflage, it's still probably going to be faster. Well, of course it's still going to be faster. Yeah, it is really good for a common. Alright, next is Glyptodon, which is... most people say this is better than Aramotherium, but I disagree. But this is definitely second best. Glyptodon is great, and I can't find it. There it is. So, it's Skulosaurus, but better. Its base stats are weaker than Skulosaurus, but its moveset is better, just because it has Resilient Rampage instead of Taunting Rampage. So, Dodge and Distract will not be able to do anything against it. This thing literally beats an Apex. It beats Gorgosaurus. It beats Erlichosaur. It beats Erlichosaur. It beats so many high-tier cunning creatures. And it is a really great common. The last common is a little bit weaker than Glyptodon. A little bit weaker than these other two, but it's still mid-alpha worthy. It's Velociraptor. This thing has just... its health is so tiny, but its damage and speed are so good with a basic cunning moveset and distract immune. This thing just is... You're almost always going to go first, and then you're going to get a pounce that is going to deal a lot of damage. This thing just one-shots quite a few good creatures. And, yeah, Velociraptor is quite underrated, in my opinion. Okay, time for the rares. Starting off with Carnotaurus. So this is another counterattacker. I would say it's better than Megalo, though some will disagree. So it's got worse base stats than Megalo, but it has greater rending counter, which is absolutely amazing. It is easily the best counterattack in the game. There are no questions asked. Just on a counterattack, shaving off a third of the opponent's health is awesome. Plus, Cleansing Impact's a decent move, too. There isn't much more to say about Carno. Alright, next we have 2 that are very close in viability and are at the top of mid-alpha. So, Delophors and Dimetrodon. So, Dilo is a cunning... it's Procerado, or Procerado slash Molophosaurus, but better. It's slower than those, but it has really good health for a cunning creature like this. And a good damage output, because Distracting Impact and Cunning Rampage, you could just do that 1-2 punch, and that will do over 4,500 damage, which will kill most of the chompers that it needs to kill. And then, like, Giraffe Titan actually loses to this when it swaps in on Dilo, even with that swap in slow. So yeah, Dilo's good. And then Dimetrodon is a fierce creature. Basically, yeah, it's better than its epic hybrid. It's better than post Dimetrodon. But it is really good. It's got good resistances. It's got decent base stats, and it's got a decent moveset. Critical Impact may be worse than Rampage, but I would say it works for this because it's a good turn 1 option, and then you can do Defense Shattering at turn 2, or you could do the other way around for the better cooldowns. Entirely depends. It's pretty versatile with the way you can which one you could do turn 1 for your needs, and it does a lot of damage. It's good, and it's got resistances, of course. Okay, next is Iniasuchus. Iniasuchus is Stegosaurus, but better. Not much better, but better. It's got a little bit less survivability due to the less armor, but it's faster, and Resilient Impact isn't much better than Slowing Impact, because Slowing Impact's good, but it does deal with distraction pretty well. And that is literally all the difference there is between this and Stegosaurus. It's fine. Okay, Erlichosaurus Gen 2. I would actually put this above the Epic Erlichosaurus, which we'll get to later, but just slightly. Erlich Gen 2 is another cunning creature, like the other Therizinosaurs. So, it's got cunning stats, and a cunning moveset. Precise Rampage is good. Debilitating Distraction is great. Just reducing their damage by 75% for 2 turns, that's good. And then you can chain that with Precise Rampage. That's a good amount of damage. 4,050 in 2 turns is not bad at all. But of course it loses to Resilience like all other cunnings do, and Resilience are everywhere. Alright, Oviraptor. Oviraptor is pretty underrated, and I'd put that near the top of this tier. Oviraptor is, of course, not as good as the mainstay rare cunnings of Ornithomimus and Kolenkin, but it's not bad. Sure, it's got worse base stats than those two. Sure, it actually probably has better resistances than Kolenkin. But Devious Strike is so good. I love Devious Strike. It's one of my favorite moves to use. It makes you take less damage and increases the potential lethality of your Cunning Rampage. That's good. And then Sidestep is a good move, but honestly, from my experience, you don't really need Sidestep that much with this. However, it of course loses to Resilience, and unlike Kolenkin and Ornithomimus, Dracorex kills it on a swap in. So yeah. Okay. Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is another bleeder, and a pretty good one. So, its base stats aren't good, except for the speed. Speed's fine. But it's got Lethal Wound and No Escape, which is a awesome combo. And Fierce Impact, I guess, is fine for the extra damage on turn 2 after you do the bleed. It's of course the worst version of its Gen 2, and we'll get to the Gen 2 later. It's a basic leader. Alright, the last spot's a little bit controversial because I think it's a little bit overrated. That is Titanoboa Gen 2. Don't get me wrong, it's a good rare, and I would put it near the top of mid-alpha. But I don't think it's that amazing as people... It's not as amazing as people say. Sure, those resistances are good, and the health and speed are alright, but the damage output just isn't good. Well, unless they swap out, but... That is the good thing about this, is it's a swap punisher, and swaps are everywhere. But if they don't swap out, you're only doing 3,500 to 2 turns, which isn't that great. Shielded Accelerating Strike, though, I like. Just give it something better than Precise Impact, though, and then I would put it definitely in high alpha. And if it's like something amazing, then low elite, maybe even. Okay, moving on. Oh wait, no, I forgot we gotta do the epics. Okay, so our first epic here is blue. Blue is a little bit overrated, but it's not bad at all. So it's just really frail, even for a raptor, especially an epic. It's easily the most frail of the epic raptors, and Trodon's included in that, by the way. So its damage output isn't the best, but it's not bad. It's still 4,500 in 2 turns, which is less than some of the other raptors, but still good. Well, actually, it's 4,550, but there isn't anything between 4,500 and 4,550 in health. And of course, it's really fast. And it actually has decent resistances. And then Evasive Impact's a good move, and Precise Bounce is good. The moveset's good, just give it more health, and I'll be on board. Okay, Carbon Emies. Carbon Emies is just Myelenia, but better. It's got more armor, though it does have less damage and less speed. But it actually has resistances. And then Dig In is obviously better than Lesser Emergency Heal. And then still has Superior Vulnerability and Devastation. Carbon Emies isn't great. It's definitely not as great as it used to be. Old Carbon Emies was a nightmare. But it is not bad. And it has some good epic matchups. Like, it beats all those Cunnings and stuff. Okay, Concavenator. So, Concavenator, I would say, is equal, maybe slightly better than Carno. So it's got better base stats across the board. And then it's got Resilient Strike, which is obviously better than Vulnerability Strike, and it still has Taunting Shields. Defense Shouting Impact versus Cleansing Impact, I'm not entirely sure, but Cleansing Impact might be a little bit better. But the one thing this thing has worse than Carno is the counterattack. Red Running Counter is awesome. Defense Shouting Counter is still good, but not quite as good. But this is the reason I would say this is better than Carno is again because of Resilient Strike, and also because it has good base damage for our counterattacker with an impact too. Alright, Dimodactylus. Dimodactylus is very overrated in my opinion. It's a swap and bleed with no escape. It's like Scaff, but better. Well, Scaphognathus, but better. It's just more health than Scaphognathus with slightly less speed, which doesn't matter. It's got Swap Prevention immune, unlike Scaff. And then Cleansing Swoop is awesome. Cleansing Swoop is a great move, especially compared to Swap and Wound. This thing's just not going to survive very many hits. It does not have use for its other moves. The only reason to use this is the Swap In, the No Escape, and Cleansing Swoop. That's it. And it does not need to swap out moves at all. Dimodactylus isn't bad, but I just don't think it's that great. Okay, Dodo. Dodo is at the very top of this tier with Dilo and Dimetrodon. It's our first flock creature, and flocks are great. They're a great class of dino. And this thing has got decent resistances, decent base stats, and a really good moveset. Flightless Strike really isn't that good, but it's fine. Protective Alert's good, especially in the threatened state, because of the Rally Heal. And Alert Decoy is awesome because it is literally a guaranteed crit rampage and run, which is awesome. And of course, it's a flock dino, so it has Absorb. That said, I don't think it's quite as good as the Compy Duo, and it doesn't have all the swap in and no escape stuff that the Compies have. So it's not quite high alpha, but it's close. Alright, Edaf Asaurus, another one that I think is really overrated. Edaf Asaurus, I would actually put, in fact, I'd probably say it's better than Dimetrodon, honestly, but just slightly. So this is the best creature in this tier. So this is just slightly better than Dimetrodon, but still, the main thing is you basically need setup with Persistent Ferocious Strike to get going with this. If it had higher base damage, so give it 1,200 base damage, then this easily goes in high alpha, and would probably be better than Secodonto as well. But it doesn't. Its damage output, it basically needs Persistent Ferocious Strike to do good damage. And quite a few good things kill it in 2 turns before it can get that ferocious boosted rampage off. But at least it has really good resistances and good health. Alright, Erlichosaurus. So, it's a little bit worse. It's just slightly worse than Erlich Gen 2. The main thing is it has over Erlich Gen 2 is damage. But it has a worse distracting move. Distracting strike is quite a bit worse than debilitating distraction. It's still good though, and that's really all you need to know about Erlich. Okay, Majesto. Majesto is probably worse than Titanoboa Gen 2, but it's still not bad. I do think it's still overrated. I completely missed it. I still think it's overrated. So, it's a counter-attacking, on-escape ability snake thing with a bunch of resilient abilities. So, good resistances, of course. Awful base stats, like most of the other counter-attackers. Precise impact is bad, but the rest of the moveset's really good. And then breaking counter is good, and on-escape dust cloud's good. It's too frail. Give this thing 4,200 health, and it gets so much better. And maybe give it a little bit more speed, like 112 or 113. But it's still good at what it does, I guess. Okay, Pachycephalosaurus. Pachy is right here. Pachy is just a rampage and run, resilient with swap and stun. Okay base stats, like mediocre to decent base stats across the board with a simple moveset. You're really not going to use Shielding Strike that much. You're mostly just going to do Disordering Impact and then Rampage and Run, 4,200 damage and into something else, preferably a Swapper. And then you could bring it back into Swap and Stun, but I would rather bring it in normally so that the Rampage and Run actually swaps you out. Okay. What's next? Smilodon. Smilodon is near the top of this tier. Smilodon's a good cunning, mostly because it has good damage, just really good damage. And Prowl's a decent move, better than Deliberate Prowl in my opinion. And then Evasive Strike and Precise Pounce, 2 cunning moves. And then it's got cunning stats. It's a cunning, it does cunning things, it kills fierce creatures, it dies to resilience, and it's fine. Well, it's good. It's good. It's just a weaker Pyro-Raptor, honestly. Stygimoach, the last epic in mid-alpha. So, Steggy is also near the top of this tier. It's better than Pachy, in my opinion. So, it's got more speed and more attack, but less health. It doesn't have Rampage and Run as Impact and Run, but this Impact and Run will do almost as much damage as Pachy's Rampage and Run. And then Instant Charge is really good. Yeah. You're not gonna do all that much damage in 2 turns. You probably won't be doing Impact and Run on turn 2. You'll probably be doing it on turn 3. So with the 3-turn combo, you do Shooting Strike on turn 1, since that's all you can do. Then Instant Charge, then Impact and Run. That is 5250, which is pretty good. And then you can combo that Impact and Run into a Swapper. It is frail, though, which is what keeps it out of high alpha, and it also lacks resistances. Okay, let's get to the 2 legendaries here. Entlemoth. Entlemoth is near the top of this tier, and remember when this thing was, like, the second best creature in the entire game? When this thing had basically no bad matchups, it destroyed everything, it tortured people that did not know how to kill it, and it was just so busted. And now it is the complete opposite. It is one of the weakest legendaries. It does not have... It just doesn't have any good damage output, really. And it's not that great anymore. So... just meh base stats, okay resistances, and a weak-ish moveset. Persistent Ferocious Strike is good, Mutual Fury is good, Group Shattering Impact's okay, Bellows, yeah. And then the Minor Heal on Escape's good. I would, like, Minor Heal on Escape's a good move. I'll say that. But you still got the double Frosty, Group Shattering Impact, which that will deal, I believe, 3,000 damage. But still not that great. I think the better combo would actually just do Persistent Ferocious Strike and Group Shattering Impact for, I believe, 3,750. Yeah, Antomoth could use some work, but it's not awful, I guess. Megalosukis. Megalosukis is probably in the middle of this tier. So, the middle of mid-alpha, so just mid-alpha. It's another counter-attacker. It is worse than Gorga Sukis and really isn't much better than Megalosaurus. So, low health, like most... It's just got bad base stats, like most counter-attackers. It can't be slowed, which is good. The main reason this thing isn't good is because Group Frosty Strike is trash. So, you're not going to be able to get a Ferocious Boosted Fierce Impact. You're just going to do a Group Frosty Strike, and then a Ferocious Boosted Counter, which is 3,000 damage plus 1,500 from Fierce Impact. Yeah, it's got okay output, but it's just really frail, and the heal is not for that much. And it's also slow. So, yeah. Okay. On to High Alpha. We're almost done. This video is already really long. Of course, there are no comments here, so we'll start the rares. Starting with Diplotator. Diplotator is pretty underrated, honestly. I like Diplotator. It's got a lot of damage. So, 2,100 plus 3,150. That is 5,250 in 2 turns. That is a lot of damage. Ferocious Strike plus Defense Shouting Impact is a good combo with this thing. So it's frail, fast, and very high damage with distracting moves, frosty, and defense shouting. It's a cunning fierce, and it's just you get that combo off and then die. But that combo is gonna kill quite a few things. Just don't bring it out against a thing that can slow it down or is faster, and you're set. It's really good against fierce creatures. That's its main thing. Okay. Kolenkin. Kolenkin is, another cunning. What's going on? You're not gonna work? Yay, the Dino Dex isn't working. So I'll just have to pull up the field guide then. So, Kolenkin is, yeah, as I said, it's a cunning creature. It's the same line as Forest Rockos. Let me find it in the field guide. There it is. So it's got 3,000 health, which is bad, of course. 1,600 damage, which is a lot, and then 131 speed, which is a lot. Sidestep, Breaking Claws, Evasive Strike, Swap and Dodge. So you can do 4,800 to 2 turns, which is pretty good. Swap and Dodge is good. Bleed Immune, which isn't particularly useful. But yeah, and then Sidestep can be good at times. It's a completely dodge based cunning, and it's good. And it actually beats Dracorex if Dracorex swaps in on a full health Kolenkin. Okay, Moschops. Moschops is, in my opinion, the strongest of the low alphas, or high alphas. Sorry. Moschops is good. Pretty underrated. So it's got 4,500 health at 25% armor. And then 1,000 damage at 113 speed. It can't be slowed, it can't be stunned, so that's good resistances. And then Resilient Strike, which is great. Revenge Accelerating Impact, which is good. Precise Rampage, which is good. Swap and Slow, which is less good. Really, with Revenge, you could just spam double Rampage, 4,000 2 turns, and then you just cycle a Rampage and an Impact until you die. Or swap out. That's really all you do with Moschops. It's a cunning repellent, and yeah. Oh, finally, is the Dino Dex gonna work now? Finally, okay. So yeah. What's next? Nizudo. Nizudo is another one of the strongest high alphas. It's a swapper. It's a Ceratopsian that I actually like. So, a lot of health with 20% armor. And the other two stats are completely just not worth talking about because they're bad. The moveset, this thing has no damage output. You do not use this thing to deal damage. You just swap it in and then spam Distraction and Greater Stunning Strike until you can swap out. Long Distorting Strike, I guess, is used sometimes too, but not quite as much. It is a swapper that can beat some fierce creatures. Like, it beats Marsupial-Lion and Androsarchus, I think, by just spamming Distraction constantly. Or at least comes really close to beating them, or enough to swap out. And it's Swap Prevention immune, so it can just go right through No Escape. Nizudo is good, but it's not the strongest rare swapper, in my opinion. Which, that one will be in the next video. Ornithomimus. Ornithomimus is the other really, really strong rare cunning that isn't a flock creature. Ornith is, I would say, better than Kolenkin, and most people agree. Literally the exact same base stats. It just has better resistances and then Rampage or Run. Instant Destruction instead of Sidestep, I don't really know which one to say is better. And it also doesn't have a swap-in ability, but Rampage and Run is just so good. You can combo this with a Woolly Rhino swap, and that is absolutely painful. That would be 4,700 in one turn. Wow. Plus a stun. Yeah, and this thing just goes right through the no escapes as well, because it's Swap Prevention immune, and it can't be distracted, and it can't be stunned. Ornith is good. And it's near the top of High Alpha. And our last rare is T-Rex Gen 2. T-Rex Gen 2 is near the bottom of High Alpha, but this thing is, in my opinion, quite underrated. It's another chomper with a lot of damage, low speed, and okay health. It's just Fierce Strike, Defense Shutting, Impact, Armor Piercing Rampage. You're going to spam all these big moves. You're going to deal a lot of damage to tanks. And, yeah. It completely wrecks things like Dodicarus, Dracorex, Giraffatitan, all these good rare tanks. Boa Gen 2. And then it beats some of the epic tanks, I think it beats Antarctopelta. It beats Brachy. It definitely doesn't beat Diplodocus, but Diplodocus is insane. So, of course it doesn't. Yeah, it's a rare chomper, and the best of the rare chompers. Okay. Moving on to the epics. The epics make up most of this tier. Elanqua. Elanqua is good. It's a good, fast tank. Well, its health isn't that great, and it has no armor. It's just, it has long invincibility, which automatically classes it as a tank no matter what. Unless it's Quatorian, but Quatorian's a kind of a cunning, so, yeah. And it's actually got pretty okay base damage with a Rampage, so that's 3,600 at 2 turns if you don't use long invincibility, which you're almost always going to use long invincibility of this thing. And it's also really fast, and it has swap-in invincibility. This thing is just gonna troll things that have like a big defense, like not defense shattering hit ready. You just swap this in and that's completely wasted, and then they won't be able to get through you if they don't have defense shattering because of the long invincibility. It's good, and I like it. Okay, Androtodon. Androtodon is... It's worse than Androsarchus and only slightly better than Glyptodon, but it's not bad like some people say it is. Sure, the base stats aren't that good, but the moveset's really good. And it can't be slowed, which is always nice. Exposing counter plus rending takedown, oh my gosh. So basically, on turn 2, as long as they're not bone immune, and as long as they're not distracting you or dodging, you are going to just shave off 90% of their health. And if you crit, they're going to die instantly. And it also has Cleansing Impact, which is great. Armor Piercing Impact is bad. Don't even look at it. Don't even look at it. And then No Escape's always good, too. So Androtodon's pretty underrated. Antarctopelta. One of the strongest creatures in this tier. Antarctopelta is a beast. So, low-ish health, but 30% armor, which completely makes up for that. And then low-ish damage, but that gets made up by the moveset. And low speed, which gets made up by the decelerating counter. Resistances are completely, they're not noteworthy at all. Spear of Vulnerability, which actually isn't that great on this because it doesn't have a big hit to smash it into. But Tonic Shields and Revenge Instant Ferocity. Revenge Instant Ferocity, you bring this in on Revenge, and then you get 3 turns of 50% Ferocity with that counterattack. You're just going to be dishing out 1500 damage, decelerating counters. And you're going to survive a lot because you have good survivability. And it has really good matchups. In fact, I think this thing can beat Diplodocus, or at least come really close to beating Diplodocus. And if you're an epic that beats Diplodocus, then you're good. Okay, Baryonyx. Baryonyx is on the lower end of high alpha, but it's still a good dino. So, really good base stats across the board. And it can't be slowed down with 126. Its moveset could use some work, though. Group Takedown is absolutely useless, and you're never, ever going to use it if you're not in raids with Baryonyx. You're just going to go Defense, Shouting Strike, and Fierce Rampage. For 4,200 in 2 turns, which is good. With a high crit chance, so you'll probably do more. It's a tank buster, and it doesn't quite beat Diplodocus, but it brings Diplodocus pretty low. And if it crits, it'll bring it to Woolly Rhino range. Okay, Compies. The Epic Compies. I have not used the Epic Compies yet, so I don't really know. But on paper, they're weaker than the rare Compies, but they're not bad at all. They are really good epics. They're near the very top of this tier. So 3,600 health, which may seem low, but it's a flock creature, so in reality it's actually really high because it's a flock creature. And then high speed and mad damage. It's got good resistances. And then Cunning Strike, which is fine. Hop and Mock, which is fine. Alert Scurry, which is great. Alert Scurry is awesome. Especially like Rally Heal with an impact that distracts, that's good. And then without when not threatened, a Rampage on turn 1 that distracts. It's basically Pounce, really. And then Alert the Flock, which is a swapping ability. Basically, you bring this thing out, and then you can swap it back in later when it's threatened, and Rally Heal and Dodge. And then Alert Swarm, which is basically when secure, it's a no escape, and then it doesn't work when it's threatened, obviously. And of course, Absorb because it's a flock dino. Compies are really good. Dakota Raptor. It's Trodon, but better. So, compared to Trodon, it has less speed, but more health. I think the same resistances. And then Precise Bounce and Distracting Rampage, and then Sidestep. So, Precise Bounce, Distracting Rampage, Precise Bounce, Sidestep, repeat. Although you're obviously not going to survive that long. You're mostly just going to survive to do Precise Bounce, Distracting Rampage, Precise Bounce for 7,200 damage in 3 turns. 4,802. Not the best Epic Cunning, because there's a few in Elite, which we'll get to, but still really good. Okay. Gorga Sukis. This is basically Post-Dimetrodon, but better. Less speed, and less resistances, but a better moveset. Cleansing Impact and Heal, I don't know which to say is better, but Cleansing Impact works better with Gorga Sukis' archetype. Fierce Rampage, though, Group Frosty Strike, Fierce Rampage, that's 4,500 in 2 turns, which doesn't sound that great, but it's enough for what it needs. It's gonna kill some tanks. It's gonna kill tanks. This thing comes pretty close to beating freaking Tanotorex. You do Group Frosty Strike and then Cleansing Impact. You bring Tanotorex basically down to 3,750 health. Or, sorry, 750 health for swap in / setup kill. Yeah, Gorga Sukis is good. It's got pretty decent matchups. Okay. Procerathomimus. Proceratho, Yoshi, my old mascot before 2.0 when it got wrecked. Old Procerathomimus was absolutely broken and extremely overpowered, especially for an epic. Nowadays, it's less so. It is a little bit slow for a cunning, but it's got average cunning health. But it's got a lot of damage, and of course got good resistances. Cunning Strike, Distracting Rampage, you're going to be using these two on 4,800 to 2 turns is respectable. Instant Distraction, Evasive Stance, Null Counter, which is alright, Swap and Nullification, which is absolutely useless. Ghost Raptor's fine. It's a decent epic hybrid. Renchenia. Renchenia is kind of a mix between Oviraptor and Ornithomimus. It's worse than Ornithomimus, but it's not bad. It's still high alpha. So it's got the same stats as Oviraptor, except for slightly less crit chance, but a good amount more damage. Same resistances. So, same moveset, except Cunning Rampage is swapped out for Rampage and Run, which is really good. DV Strike plus Rampage and Run. If you don't crit either of them, then that is still 4350 in 2 turns. And if you crit, which is very likely, if you crit one of those, that's going to be a lot of damage. It's just a lot. It's good. It's of course weaker than Ornithomimus because it doesn't have those crazy resistances and it's more frail. But still. Alright, Secodontosaurus. Secodonto is a more frail, completely offense-based version of like Dimetrodon and Edafo, and I would say it's better than both. Its health still isn't bad, but it has really good damage. Still has those resistances. And then Fierce Strike, Fierce Rampage, Armor Piercing Impact. That is 5250 in 2 turns, which is great. It's good. It's a tank buster, of course, and there's not anything else to say about it. Okay, Spino Gen 2. Spinosaurus Gen 2 is a straight upgrade of the Gen 1. More health, and then Cleansing Strike instead of Fierce Strike, which I would say is a little bit better. Everything else is the exact same, and moving on. Okay, our last epic here is T-Rex. So, Rex is... I'm just going to compare it to Rex Gen 2. Is a little bit more health, a little bit more damage, a little bit less speed, a little bit higher crit chance. And then Armor Piercing Rampage is swapped out for Fierce Rampage. Defense Shouting Impact swapped out for Fierce Impact. This thing has absolutely ridiculous damage output. I believe this is over 6,000 in 2 turns. I think this is 6,650 in 2 turns, which is absolutely amazing. Of course, it is extremely slow, and it's very vulnerable to being distracted or dodged. But it will kill basically all the like epic tanks that aren't Brontolasmus and Diplodocus. Yeah. It's good. Rex is good. Pretty underrated in my opinion. Okay, now we got to deal with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 legendaries here. So our first one is Enkintrosaurus. Enkintrosaurus is probably one of the strongest in this tier. Probably tied with Pyratator and... Yeah, probably tied with Pyratator for the strongest legendary in high alpha. It's not very good, especially for legendary. It's probably weaker than Antarctopelta here. Which means Antarctopelta is the strongest Ankylosaur animation creature in the game. So, bad base stats, though the armor does make up for the health. Weak resistances. The moveset's alright. Taunting Rampage is bad, but it works as superior vulnerability. Group Taunting Shield Strike, Invincibility Taunt for shield. Medium Resilient Counter for some extra damage. It beats Cunning's, but unfortunately it just doesn't do enough, really, to warrant a lower elite spot. Okay, Bahatonodon. Bahatonodon, whatever. It's another Hadrosaur, but it's actually not terrible. Okay resistances, I guess. Low speed and decent health with high base damage, though it only has, like, 1 strike. 3,002 turns is obviously not good, but this thing can heal like an absolute monster. If you're fighting this and you have like a low damage dino that won't do much damage at all, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. And group invincibility, of course, to stall even more for the heal cooldowns. Of course, it's not good at all. It's a weak legendary, but it's not as bad as some people say. Some people have said it's even worse than Stegosaurus, which is ridiculous. Okay, Gigaspicosaur. Gigaspica is I'll compare it with Ankintro. So it's got more health at the same armor, more damage, and 1 less speed. Resilient Strike, Group Disorder Strike, Rampage, Short Defense. So I'd say it's got a little bit weaker moveset, it's got a weaker moveset, which is why I would say it's worse than Ankintro. Of course, this is probably a little bit worse than Group Taunting Shield Strike. Rampage is better than Taunting Rampage, but Resilient Strike, probably about the same as the other one. And Group Disorder Strike's trash. Medium Counterattack's obviously worse than Medium Resilient Counter. In 2 turns, I believe this is 4,000 in 2 turns, which is fine. Yeah, Gigaspica is another tank. Okay, Kulaborginia. Kulaborginia is probably the weakest of the legendaries in high alpha. So actually not. I probably tied with Gigaspica. So really high health, low damage, and mediocre speed with some resistances. It's just bad damage output. This thing will only do This is only gonna do 2,500 in 2 turns, which is terrible. But it can survive for a while with the mix of Distract and Shield. Yeah, it's bad for a legendary. Alright, our last creature of this video is Pyratator. Where is it? Oh, yeah, right here. Pyratator is obviously worse than Pyroraptor. So, it's got good damage and good speed and a great moveset. So why is it in high alpha? Because its health is absolute garbage. Just give this thing like 3,300 health and this is easily like low to mid elite. But no, you give this just awful health, which means this is a weak legendary. Like its moveset is really good. Its other stats are pretty good. And you give it really bad health. Yeah. Yeah, I would really appreciate a buff for it too, because it looks like its design is great. I like Pyratator's design, and I like its moveset. Just the health. Anyways, that's the that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments and on the Discord. I probably make another one of these tonight for the elite tier, although I might not. I don't know. Subscribe if you'd like, and I'll see you for the high tiers. Goodbye.